She said something to me on the phone that night that I have never forgotten. She saw through my laughter to the girl that just a few hours before was sitting on the floor, lonely and feeling overwhelmed, and in some ways in despair over my own inadequacy. And she said 3 simple words: God sees you. Hi, I'm Sarah Short, your host of the No Way But Through podcast. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all things mom: how to parent through those exhausting days with your little ones, how to be intentional and connected with your big kids, and how to embrace what truly matters and let go of the rest. From life with a newborn to toddlers to teenagers and everything in between, I'll teach you foundational and practical strategies on how to walk through every season of motherhood with courage and creativity, all while prioritizing your relationships with your kids and a home life where all of you can thrive. My Nana once told me, there's no way but through. Turns out she was right in life and in motherhood. So come along with me as we become better moms together. This is the No Way But Through podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome back into the No Way But Through podcast. I am your host, Sarah Short. Y'all, can you believe that we are almost at Thanksgiving? I was trying to wrap my mind around this the other day because I feel like we were literally just in bathing suits at the pool and at the beach, and here we are almost at Thanksgiving. I want so much to savor this season, and I don't want it to speed by. So it just reminded me this week that I just need to slow down and enjoy this time with my kids. We just wrapped up football season for one of my boys. One of them played and one of them coached. We are about to wrap up a theater production for one of my other boys. And so I'm really hoping over these next few weeks that my family will be able to slow down and enjoy some time together, even before we get into the weeks leading up to Christmas. Do y'all feel that? Do you feel that with your little ones? I was thinking about you, young moms, as I was reflecting on that, being here we are almost at Thanksgiving and remembering all of the things that I had to do as a young mom at this time of year. I was remembering packing up and going to Baltimore because we lived in Michigan, and we would head back east to Baltimore for Thanksgiving, and just all that required of me to plan for that trip. If I wanted to contribute food in some meaningful way, I had that on top of all the packing. And are we remembering all the stuff that we're going to need for our babies and toddlers? And then returning home from Thanksgiving and wanting to decorate for Christmas. And that was a whole deal. Y'all feel that, right? I didn't want ornaments to break, so I wasn't sure which ornaments did I want to put out or keep away, which ornaments needed to be up high. And then the entire third bottom of my tree, I remember, was just empty because I knew my toddlers would pull all of those off. I was thinking about y'all because I remember, as much as I loved this season with my little ones, it required so much of me. And I will tell you, as a mom who is now 10, 15, 20 years further down the road than you are, that it is so much easier for me now. I can slow down and savor this time, and I'm not doing all of that mental juggling of newborns and infants and toddlers and little kids. And so I just want to encourage you, one, that I see you. I remember, I know how much thought goes into all that you're doing right now. I know that it's emotionally and physically taxing, even though the joy of the season is all around you with your little ones. And two, I want to tell you that it does get easier. There are days of motherhood ahead of you where leading up to the holidays won't feel like it does right now, with all of the chaos and all of the managing and wondering if you're going to be able to even get yourself dressed and look decent for Thanksgiving. You are in a really sweet season, but I also know there's a lot of hard that comes with these years too. So you are seen and you are loved and you are known, and I get it. And I am so glad you're taking time to be here with me today. I want to share with you today 5 things I wish I knew when I was a young mom. These are things that I learned along the way. And some of them are things that moms who were ahead of me, that have had braved the path of motherhood before me, told me when I was a young mom. And I embraced these things and began to believe these things. And as I did that, motherhood got easier for me. These are all things that I still believe wholeheartedly today, 20 years into my motherhood journey. And so, what I want to do today is just look back at you young moms who are a couple of stages behind me and share these things with you, with the hope that maybe in the same way that these things encouraged me, they will encourage you. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but if we were to sit down to coffee, if you were one of the young moms in my real life, I have a handful of them that I see regularly. If we were sitting down to coffee and you were listening to me share with you about motherhood, these are some of the things that I would want to pass along to you. And these are things that I talk about regularly with the young moms in my life. So I just want to share these 5 things that I wish I knew when I was a young mom with you today, because each of these things encouraged my heart. They changed me and the way that I saw my days as a mother. They gave me strength and perspective, and so I want to share these with you today. So let's get right into it. Number 1, you don't have to parent the way your parents parented you or the way your friends are parenting their kids. You know, I did most of my hard work with this in terms of really grasping onto this when my kids were a little bit older. When I began to parent my oldest son in his middle school years is when I really grasped onto this and firmed up and strengthened my muscles around this idea. And I wish I had done it more when I was a very young mom. I talked about this some in the episode I did a few weeks ago on group parenting. But what I didn't realize was there is and can be this sort of unspoken expectation in your community around you that everyone is sort of going to parent the same. And what I was finding back when my son was in middle school was that some of the ways that my friends were parenting, some of the ways that some of my acquaintances were parenting on the fringes of my groups of friends, or even in just the larger community around me, people that I just knew through friends of friends, that they were not parenting in ways that Jason and I were parenting. Now, this wasn't my first exposure to this. My first exposure was not when my oldest son was in middle school. I shared this in episode 2 in the very first full episode of this podcast last fall, titled 2 Moms of 1 or 2 Children. But I remember a friend coming to my house when I had my first 2 little boys, when I was making a sandwich for my son, and her gasping at me and saying, "You're going to give him peanut butter at 10 months old?" And I remember being taken so back by that because my pediatrician had told me to go ahead and test out peanut butter on him. And I wrestled with what happened that day with my friend later on. I was wrestling through that and I was like, you know what? Yes, I'm going to give him peanut butter. And I'm going to do that because my pediatrician has told me to do this. I just remember thinking, gosh, she doesn't need to give her kids peanut butter at 10 months, but this is what I'm going to do. That was some of my first exposure to having a friend or someone question my parenting. And I remember wanting to be brave in my parenting. You don't have to parent your kids the way your friends are parenting their kids. You just don't. God has called you and tasked you with parenting the very individual kids that He has given you in the unique makeup of your family. He is not tasking you to parent your friends' kids, nor is He asking them to parent yours. You are free to parent your kids in the way that you feel is right and good for your kids and your family. Every time that I share this with the young moms in my real life, I always say this as well. You do need wisdom from others. You need to seek out wisdom and guidance from other people, from books that you're reading, from friends, from your family, from other trusted moms. You do need to do that. You should never parent on an island. You are not always going to get things right, and you need guidance from other people. But as you seek out wisdom and guidance from others, you can take what works for you and apply it to your kids and to your family, what you feel like is best for the unique kids that you are raising. And then you can lovingly discard the rest with no explanation. There is unlimited parenting advice out there, y'all. You know this, right? It's unlimited. And I know that most of you listening to this today, you are bombarded with that on social media or in the books that people are telling you to read or on podcasts or on TV talk shows, whatever it is, in every area of media. You are going to get advice on how to parent. And I just want to tell you right now, today, that you don't have to parent your kids the way your friends are parenting theirs, or the way the media tells you to parent your kids, or the way that your parents parented you. One of the things that I have really had to wrestle with is how much of my parenting has been impacted by my parents, particularly by my mom. I don't talk about this much on this podcast, but I have a very complicated relationship with my mom, and there are a lot of ways that she parented me and my siblings that are not how I ever wanted to parent my kids. And I know that so many of the things that I saw her do can often be the default in my own parenting, meaning the way that I was raised, I can default to that in my reactions, in the way that I discipline my kids, in the way that I respond to my kids. I will find myself, catch myself imitating even destructive patterns of behavior that I saw growing up. And so I've had to work hard at this to recognize and to remind myself that I do not have to parent my kids the way my mom parented me. I don't know if this might be your story too, and that you look back on the way that you were parented and you said, I do not want to parent my kids this way. I don't want to engage in the destructive patterns that I was parented under. But I will tell you this, it requires intention, and it requires hard work, and it requires introspection to parent differently. So whether it is your friends who are parenting a certain way, or you're looking back on the way you were parented, you do not have to parent the way your friends are parenting their kids, and you don't have to parent the way your parents parented you. You need guidance and you need wisdom from other people. You absolutely do. Please hear me say that. But you are free to parent the kids God has given you in a way that you feel is best for you, and to seek to honor God with this incredible task that He's given you in loving and parenting your kids. Number 2, God sees every sacrifice you make. I have this very distinct memory of a particular morning in the fall of 2007. I was quite pregnant with my third son. I had 2- and 3-year-old toddlers at home, and we were living in Michigan. I didn't have any family around, and Jason was getting up very early every morning and going into the office and would come home in the evening when it was already dark outside. I was incredibly overwhelmed. In some ways, I was dreading the late fall and winter because I knew that it meant that it would be hard for us to go out anywhere because of the snow and the cold in Michigan. And so I spent most of my days alone with my 2 little boys. It was lonely. I was lonely. It was cold. I didn't have any family around, and I was completely overwhelmed. I remember waking up one morning and my 3-year-old had already gotten up to say goodbye to his dad. His dad left for work, and I got my 2-year-old out and came downstairs. I was making coffee. I was trying to get myself going, and I realized that I wasn't sure where my 3-year-old was. Y'all, you know, right? Silence is the enemy. If you can't hear them, there's probably a problem, especially if you are a mom of rowdy boys. So I decided to go looking for my 3-year-old to figure out where he was. And y'all, he had found my makeup. He was painting the carpet and the walls and himself with lipstick and mascara and eyeliner and blush, and my brand new eyeshadow had crumbled all over the floor in our rental home, all over the carpet. And he had essentially painted his arms, his hands, his face, his legs with all of my makeup. This happened on the heels of me already feeling very overwhelmed. And it's, in some ways, this actually felt like the last straw for my sanity. I had no idea how to get makeup out of carpet. I had never painted the carpet with my makeup, so I had no idea how to get it out of the rental house carpet. Jason was at work. I didn't have any friends. I couldn't call my mom. Nobody to call, nobody to help me. And I remember just sitting down in the middle of the floor and looking up at God and saying, God, I cannot do this. You knew I couldn't do this. Why did you give me these kids when you knew I couldn't do this? I felt so alone and so unseen and so isolated in that moment. I felt like it would have been easier to climb Mount Everest in snow than to go on parenting my 2 kids and being pregnant in Grand Rapids, Michigan, all alone by myself in that rental house. Later on that evening, I was talking on the phone with a mom who I was close with back in Baltimore. She is one of the moms that I talk about on here sometimes, who was a few stages ahead of me in parenting. And I had gotten to the point that evening when Jason got home and he cleaned the carpet and fixed everything for me, that I was able to laugh a little bit about what had happened with Jack. She said something to me on the phone that night that I have never forgotten. She saw through my laughter to the girl that just a few hours before was sitting on the floor, lonely and feeling overwhelmed, and in some ways in despair over my own inadequacy. And she said 3 simple words. God sees you. God sees you. Y'all, it's been almost 20 years since I first heard those words from a mom that was ahead of me on the path of motherhood. She couldn't fix anything for me, even though she wanted to. She couldn't get the makeup out of the carpet. She couldn't sit next to me and let me cry in her lap like I'd done in my early days as a mother in Baltimore. She lived back east with her older teenage daughters and her husband. But what she gave me that day in those 3 words has stuck with me for 20 years. So much so that I'm sitting here on this podcast today sharing it with you all these years later, because it had such a profound effect on me then and on the mother that I would become. What I needed to hear as a young, overwhelmed mom, alone at home with my young toddler boys, pregnant again, wanting to build a family, but not wanting everything that came with it that was so hard. All of the sacrifices, all of the late nights, the diapers, the not being able to eat a hot dinner because I'm feeding babies, all of it. What I needed to hear was that God saw me. And wrapped up in those 3 words was so much truth. He sees you. He knows you. He gets you. He's with you. You are never alone. He is for you. He loves your kids more than you do, and he's going to get you through. So much of motherhood is unseen sacrifices. We make so many sacrifices to be a mother, and God sees every single one of them. The ones that no one on the outside sees, the ones that our husbands don't see, our friends don't see, our mothers don't see. God sees them all, And He's with us every day in all of it. I am telling you this from a place of still being in this with you. Even now, as my kids are older, I have tweens and teens and young adult kids now. This truth has never been more true to me than it is today. God sees me. And I know that as I'm trying to figure out how to raise my teenagers and my young adult kids, how to be a mom to young adult kids, what do I get involved in? What do I stay out of? I needed it when I was where you are. And I need it today as a mom of older kids and young adult kids. God sees me, every sacrifice, and He sees you too. Number 3, one task at a time. When I was a really young mom, we didn't have social media at all. I've told you all this before. It arrived on the scene around 2007, 2008. That's when it came into my life. And as a writer, as someone who loves to share my life, I hopped right in and began sharing stories of my kids back then when it was just Facebook. I would get on there and share the blogs that I was writing and anecdotes and stories of my life as a young mom. It was just something I really enjoyed. And I remember one particular day I got on Facebook and I believe I was writing something about how overwhelmed I was. Are y'all sensing a pattern? Young mom Sarah was incredibly overwhelmed. But I was sharing a story about my kids and just how overwhelmed I was with all I needed to juggle, the dishes and the laundry and wanting to make a nice dinner, grocery shopping, making sure my kids had winter clothes, snow boots, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I remember getting on there and sharing about how overwhelmed I was. And my Aunt Paulette, she's actually Jason's aunt. I had come to love her so much. She commented something on that post that all these years later, I'm sharing with you. She commented, one task at a time. Just do one thing. Don't try to do it all. I think you'll find that'll help you. One task at a time. I remember reading that and closing my computer because, y'all, we didn't even have smartphones back then, and thinking to myself, okay, one task at a time. I'm just going to unload the dishwasher. There were dishes covering every single counter in my kitchen, and I was completely overwhelmed by that. So I just unloaded the dishwasher, and that was it. I remember after unloading the dishwasher thinking, okay, let me just go ahead and load up one load real quick, and I'll start the dishwasher, and that'll at least make a dent in this mess that we have here in this kitchen. So I did that next. It was this light bulb moment in my life as a young mom. I was going about it all wrong. When I would wake up in the morning in my messy bedroom and my unmade bed and head into my messy bathroom to wash my face and brush my teeth, I would come downstairs and have to wash out a coffee mug because all of them were dirty and there were dishes all over the counter from last night's dinner and yesterday's lunch and yesterday's breakfast, and the family room had toys all over it, and there were heaps and piles of laundry everywhere covering the laundry room floor. And I had little toddlers and babies all over my house that I had to care for and was likely pregnant. I was so overwhelmed by all of it, I didn't know where to begin. It all needed to be done. It all needed my attention. But the thought of doing all of that felt absolutely impossible to me. Those simple words, one task at a time. They gave me a game plan, like for the first time ever. Don't think about all of it. Don't think about how you're going to do all the laundry and pick up the family room and clean your bedroom and bathroom and kitchen and all of that. Just pick one task and complete it. And what I found happened after that, after I did that one thing, was that I wanted to do a second and then a third. And I started to make dents in this large overwhelm that I was feeling. Just a small dent in all that was in front of me. Like I told you before, I didn't have a close relationship with my mom. Nobody ever taught me how to be a mother. Nobody ever taught me how to keep house. And I would go over to my friends' houses as a young mom and go to their kitchen, and it was clean and their family room was picked up. And I just thought, what am I doing wrong? I don't understand why every room in my house is a war zone. All these years later, y'all, I am much better at keeping my house. I have older kids now. I don't have toddlers anymore. And my older kids help, which I'm telling you, y'all, that's coming for you later. You young moms, your kids are going to become your helpers. And it's just about the best thing ever. But I still say this to myself when I get overwhelmed with all that's on my plate. Sarah, one task at a time. Those words were so wise and so practical and so timely and helpful for me that they changed me. When I would get overwhelmed every year after that, every time after that, that I would stop and say to myself, one task at a time, Sarah, just complete one task at a time, the snowball started. You know, I realized later on, I believe I first heard this from Andy Stanley, but it's this idea of keystone habits. Making your bed, for example, is a keystone habit. When you get up in the morning and you make your bed, then you are more likely to pick up the shoes that are on the floor next to the bed and put them in the closet. And then after you put the shoes in the closet that were on the floor next to your bed, you'll pick up the clothes that are on the floor at the bottom of the bed and then put those away. And then maybe think to yourself, well, let me go ahead and get the trash that's on my nightstand and throw it in the trash can. Do you see what I mean? That habit of making your bed starts a snowball, because once you complete that one task, you're motivated to complete the next. That's what a keystone habit is. A habit that then snowballs into a bunch of different things that you end up doing as a result of doing that one thing first. Y'all, it took me 45 years, 45 years of life before I started making my bed every day. But for the last several years, that's what I've done. I make my bed now every day. I always wanted to make my bed. I always was like, gosh, it would be so awesome to have a made bed every day, but I could never get myself to do it. I didn't make my bed growing up. I was never taught to make my bed. But for the last several years, I make my bed. Because it's that one task, it's that keystone habit that gets me on my way. It's Aunt Paulette's words ringing true yet again in my mind. One task at a time, just one task. It's been so helpful to me, y'all. It has been so helpful to me now. It was helpful to me as a young mom, and it remains so true and helpful in my life now that I parent older kids. Number 4, your mistakes as a mom do not define you. One of the things that almost every mom I know in my real life, my peers that are my same age, the moms that have braved the path before me, that walked this road out before me, that I've talked with you about, and the young moms in my real life right now, one of the things that all of us universally deal with is mom guilt. We all face it in one way or another because we all make mistakes. We wish we could go back and do some things differently, right? If you're a mom and you're listening to this podcast, you're probably nodding your head in agreement. Even if it's just, I wish I wouldn't have reacted that way to my toddler when he or she was having a meltdown. But for most of us, it's even more than that. We've made multiple mistakes. There are many things that have even higher stakes that we wish we could go back and do differently. But I want to encourage you with this today. As a mom who now has 2 adult children, and I'm very intentional about talking with them about the kind of mother that I was and that I am, but ways that I parented them and maybe how they would parent their kids the same way or how they might do things differently. We talk about those things over here now that my kids are adults. They talk to me and Jason, and we're having conversations with them about their childhood, about their lives, and who we are as parents, particularly because I include them in a lot of my thought processes as I'm developing this podcast. But it is not my mistakes that they ever want to focus on. They are honest with me about things that happened, things they wish I would have done differently as their mom. But as quickly as they will recount those things, they want to dismiss them and talk about the memories we've made as a family, how loved they felt by me as their mother, the gifts they've gotten that were so meaningful to them on their birthdays or on Christmas, the way that Jason and I have pointed them to Jesus and fostered a closeness in our family, a closeness with God, and a relationship with Him. Here's the thing. I am a Christian. I am a Jesus follower. And so I know that all of my mistakes, all of my sin, it's covered by the blood of Jesus. And so while mom guilt is very real and we all feel it, I actually live in the truth that God has forgiven me for my mistakes. But what I want to tell you even beyond that, because I want you to know that first and foremost, that God forgives you for your mistakes if you're walking with Jesus and you've given your life to Him. But also, I want to say this. Your kids are not going to look back and define you as a mother by the mistakes that you have made. God doesn't define you that way, but your kids won't either. I shared with y'all in an episode early on in this podcast what happened with my young daughter's hair, an episode on mom guilt. It was one of the most difficult wrestlings I've ever done with mom guilt. And if you go back and listen to that episode, if you haven't listened to it yet, I would encourage you to listen to it, because in that episode, I'm able to walk you through in real time what I was feeling as that whole situation unfolded. But also the truth of what I believe about how God sees me and how much He loves me. But I also want to follow up on that and tell you that when my kids look back on that situation, because all of them remember it, including my young daughter, they speak about it with such love for me that they saw my tears and it moved them to compassion. The thing I also want to be sure to mention here and to encourage you all with today is that one of the best ways that you can fight mom guilt and not allow the enemy to use your mistakes as a weapon against you is to ask forgiveness from God, but to also regularly and consistently ask for forgiveness from your kids when you mess up. They need to hear it. They need to see it so that they know how to ask for forgiveness as well. You want to raise good forgivers. And the best way that you can do that is to model it for them by coming to them and saying you're sorry, saying, Mom messed up. Will you forgive me? Modeling that for them and then giving them an opportunity to extend forgiveness to you and to their siblings every time it's modeled for them. Your mistakes as a mother do not define you, and they never will. Number 5, there are no perfect kids and there are no perfect parents. I remember finding out I was pregnant with my first son, and one of the things I did right away was to go out and get the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, which is what all of us older moms did back then before the internet bombarded all of us with information about parenthood. But I remember just wanting to be the best mom. I mentioned to you all already, I didn't have a great mom, and I just wanted so much to be an amazing mom, even though I didn't know how. Y'all, it doesn't take long, maybe a couple of days, maybe a couple of hours into motherhood before you realize you're not going to be a perfect mom. And then you have toddlers and you realize that you actually might be a crazed lunatic mom who is raising serial killers. But even in all of that, y'all, I remember looking around at other moms and thinking they were maybe not perfect, but they were pretty darn close. And a lot of times I felt like not only are they perfect or pretty close to perfect, but they know they're perfect. They've got all the answers. Their house is always clean. Their kids are always dressed well, and any misbehavior that comes from their kids is an anomaly. That most of the time their kids are perfectly behaved and any misbehavior is just out of the ordinary. When I was a young mom, I believed and bought into that. I thought for sure on this scale of really, really horrible, horrendous mom to perfect mom, I fell somewhere maybe a little bit above average, but that I would probably never achieve the perfect status that I thought I saw in a few of my friends. I use the word friend loosely here because when I began to develop some really close friendships, especially in the last years that I was in Michigan, and we would stand around my kitchen island and the walls would come down and we set pretenses aside, it turned out that none of us were even close to perfect. Not a single one of us had perfect kids. And that if we were ever attempting to portray that to anybody else, it was really just a mask that we were trying to put on to protect others from seeing what was really going on with us and with our kids. I am now a mom of older kids and teenagers and young adults. And I wanted to share this one with you today because while that was hard for me as a young mom, because I did perceive that some moms were doing things way better than I was and pretty close to perfect, I would need to come back to this more than ever when I had teenagers. Because it turns out that moms who think or might portray that they're perfect or they're raising perfect kids when their kids are little are still doing the same thing when they have older kids and teenagers. One of the things that's so ironic that now over the years I've been a mom to teenagers is that every once in a while a mom will start out a sentence to me with something like this. I know that my son's not perfect, or I know that my daughter's not perfect, but blah, 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 somebody else is at fault here. Somebody else's kid is at fault. It's just never their kid. It's never their kid that's the problem. And it's just so ironic to me because I find so much insight in that phrase. I know my kid isn't perfect, but there are no perfect kids. There are not even close to perfect kids. Not your kids, not your friends' kids, not you as a kid. You know that, right? There are no perfect parents. Everyone's messed up. Everyone has issues. Everyone sins. Everybody needs a savior. Everybody needs forgiveness. True and rich and real friendship in your life where those walls can come down, where vulnerability has a seat at the table. Those friendships have been such a lifeline for me as a mom because it helped reinforce this idea that there just aren't perfect kids and there aren't perfect moms and there's no perfect anybody. Just Jesus. He's the only one that gets that distinction. I really wanted to encourage you with this today because I know that most of you probably have a friend or a sibling or an in-law that may portray their parenting as perfect or close to perfect and their kids as perfect or close to perfect, and that can be really, really hard to be around. But maybe even more so than being hard to be around, it's hard for our hearts to reconcile that with our own parenting, with our own kids. So what I want to say to you today is that as you struggle your way through motherhood, as you work through hard situations in parenting, and you try to find answers for a medical diagnosis or a mental health struggle with your kid, behavioral issues with your kids, just normal parenting stuff, or you're even going to counseling and working on your own self as a parent, trying to figure out why you react the way that you react. I just want to encourage you that you are not alone in struggling through parenting. And your kids are not the only kids struggling with being kids and development and being teenagers and disrespect and sin and yelling and cussing and drinking and drugs and bad decision making and all the things that we know people are dealing with, stuff that's coming for you later on down the road with your kids. Nobody has perfect kids and nobody's a perfect parent. I say this to you and I share this with you, not to just warn you about others, y'all, not to just say, hey, don't believe her when she says her kids are perfect. Don't believe her when she says she's a perfect mom or acts like she's a perfect mom. But also, y'all, for you to look inside your own heart as a mom and to remain humble about your parenting. Remain humble about your kids. Be quick to recognize to your friends, to your family, to your sister-in-law who has it all together, that you struggle through parenting and that your kids struggle with being kids, and that you know that it's okay because we have a Savior who died for us and saved us and loves us and has forgiven us, and our family is in need of His love and grace, and He's the one we rely on and look to. We have a perfect Savior, and so we never have to be perfect parents, and our kids never have to be perfect kids. So that's it for today, y'all. Just 5 things I wanted to encourage you with today. 5 things I wish I knew as a young mom. Number 1, you don't have to parent your kids the way your friends parent theirs or the way your parents parented you. Number 2, God sees every sacrifice you make. Number 3, one task at a time, just one task at a time. Number 4, your mistakes as a mom do not define you. They don't define you as a person, and they don't define you as a mother. Number 5, there are no perfect kids and there are no perfect parents. There is so much freedom in that. There's so much freedom in that, y'all. You guys, I care so much about each of you, about the words that fill your hearts and minds, the things that you listen to, the things you consume. And I hope that these 5 things today deeply encourage you, because that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be, is an encouragement to you. Like I was encouraged by older moms ahead of me when I was in your shoes and where you are today. That's it for today. I'll see y'all next time on the No Way But Through podcast. You've just listened to another episode of the No Way But Through podcast. If you want to connect with other like-minded moms and join our growing online community, head on over to Instagram and follow along with us at No Way But Through. You can always reach me over there throughout the week. And if you'd like to financially support this podcast, there's a link at the bottom of every episode where you can do just that.